speed, very few people think of going faster as less risk, but going faster actually costs less and is less risk in a lot of cases.
Thousands of companies show up to sell their technology to the U.S. Department of Defense each year, but so few will transition from proof of concept to true production across the valley of death. The select few who do, their stories are rarely told. Until now. I'm Noah Sheinbaum, and this is Crossing the Valley. Ask anyone today who is leading defense innovation from the inside of the Pentagon. My two guests today are almost sure to make the list. Justin Fanelli is the Navy Chief Technology Officer. He's a one-man machine when it comes to busting bureaucratic hurdles, and he's crafting new mental models for how the Navy does technology adoption. He's bringing companies through and getting capability in the hands of warfighters at an impressive pace. Artem Sherbinin, the CTO for the Naval Surface Force, is implementing that strategy each and every day and is driving results on the front lines for our men and women in uniform. In our conversation at Manifest Demo Day, Justin and Artem shared their clear guidance for the companies that want to be a part of driving modernization inside the Pentagon, and they shared some of the stories and hard lessons they've learned on the journey. Enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're at Manifest Demo Day. I'm joined by Justin Fanelli, the CTO of the Department of the Navy, and Artem Sherbinin, who is the Surface Navy CTO. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. Let's jump right in. I think you're here, you've been surrounded by companies who are pitching technology at you all day. Are they focused on the right topics?
A few years ago, we didn't have as many players here and then as many players on the field. And so we have tried to send as clear as the government possibly can a signal that we need to go faster. Our private sector partners have heard that call and are more interested in national security as a unit than I've seen in my career. And so these are very good things. In general, private capital has enabled that, and we can now have just more potentially, and in some cases already disruptive companies who are interested in serving the, to me, inextricable intertwining between national security and economic prosperity. So are they focused on the right things? They're focused, as best as I can tell today and in general, on blowing away status quo from a comparison perspective. And so I'd say, we'll talk about actual prioritized technology areas, but I'd say the one area that is the easiest to forget, but nearly the second most important thing is, are there divestments coming with what they're bringing so that they aren't trapped in the 3-year budget cycle that facilitates a decent portion of that valley that we're trying to cross or specifically systematically shrink?
You know, when we run war games for the greatest challenges that we have today, such as our peer competitor, China, when you war game the program of record force that you have today against China, the force generally does not come out looking particularly good in meeting its objectives in the Indo-Pacific. When you augment the program of record force with emerging technologies built by world-class primarily startups, new entrants in the defense industrial base, the program of record force plus that augmentation does win more often than not. And so what we're seeing from Manifest today and all the industry partners that demoed is that kind of augmentation. No one's going to replace large capital assets like warships. You are always going to have a $1.8 billion guided missile destroyer, but a $1.8 billion guided missile destroyer augmented with unmanned systems, complicated, electronic warfare, software-defined radios and things like that, is going to be 10 times more effective than the destroyer on its own.
Having sat through a number of hours of kind of demos and product pitches today from a variety of these companies, I'm curious, what's landing with you guys? Like, what do you think works well about this format versus how things typically work in kind of industry engagement? And then what's maybe still to be desired? Where is there still opportunity for improvement?
The normal process is a lot of meetings with a lot of different groups. It's very lossy. It's expensive for both sides. When we can fast track from paper to reality, we want to do that. And so this fast track that piece. A complementary capability that we have for looking at technology right now and where it can make disruptive headway is we now use lean business cases. That started in PEO Digital and has spread wider. What we're doing there is saying, hey, what is the latent or existing capability? What is the tech debt that you are going to erase? And then where do you move the needle on our mission outcomes? So operational resilience, where do you make us more adaptive? Where do you save thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of sailor or marine hours? And so combining those outcome-driven metrics, what we call world-class alignment metrics, with this is real, we're not talking about it, we're doing it, I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, I think it's called Manifest Demo Day, right? So the demos, that's step one. That's not a common feature, right? So in the past, when, for the last 30 years, public capital accounted for most of the outcomes in defense, and that's still the case today. But today, with the advent of like fast-moving venture capital and other sources of capital, you are seeing industry partners that move significantly faster than the primes. And so, in the past, the government would put out an RFP. We would get some semblance of a response. We would negotiate for a demo potentially because the primes wouldn't necessarily invest significant internal research and development dollars. That is not the case here. So I'm not waiting 6 months to get a demo. I'm seeing it live. Yeah, so that's awesome. And the other thing is, Justin and I, for instance, come from 2 different echelons in the Navy. I sit almost 3 echelons below Justin, right? And we're both here. And you see that, across the folks that have showed up from the Department of Defense, they are not just the acquisitions community, right? So the warfighters are here in the room, and that is actually uncommon in, I think, previous industry engagements. So this is an awesome format.
That collisions piece is really important. I want to pick up on that for a second. So I think some people used to think meeting with a 4-star was winning. The reality is we require 3 things for structured pilots. One is a pilot lead on our side. This is someone from Artem's organization, an edge organization, could be DIU, someone to run the pilot. A portfolio transition partner, someone who has operations and maintenance money so that we can pull it through so that you're not stuck with a door prize. And then an operational sponsor who at some level is able to validate and either up or down or say we really need this, but someone who can advocate as the warfighter. And so those 3 together, it's very hard to do that without the triangle being complete. But if you pour money and gas on that, we can go really fast now.
Yeah. Folks will have different legs of the stool, but it all generally aligns to those 3 things. One is just kind of like political will or horsepower in the form of some sort of champion. The other is like who's actually using the product. Do they get to put their hands on it? Do they get to provide some feedback? And then the third is like who has the money? Who's actually going to acquire it?
And at the molecular level, those are people. And so what matters more than potentially rank or other things is, do they get it and can they make something happen? And so I think we're seeing a wave of merit making the difference, right? Some organizations are much more effective than others at pulling these in, and we don't have to make it all balanced and fair. If some organization is crushing it on disruptive capabilities and the denominator is outcomes, and it is okay for one organization to be much, much better, to be power laws better. Like everyone else should copy off of them or leverage or just use those shared services. So we're not going to the lowest common denominator anymore or trying to make this even or equal.
Yeah, I love this. I want to pick up on it. And Artem, I want to bring you into this too, because I think what you're talking about is so often a problem that, or a set of activities that generate antibodies. Like if somebody's doing something really well, there's one of 2 things that can happen. The one is that we all move towards that, or in a large bureaucracy, it could be we have to kill that because that's going to threaten our job or our way of doing business. And I'm really curious because you've been innovating on the process side of this for a while now. So maybe we start with the how and we'll come back to the what. How are you making it safe for people to outperform and to kind of share best practices throughout the enterprise in a way that inspires copycatting and not killing?
The performers and the end users are showing how much better we can be. And that is telling the story for us. And so we collate, like we try to create a funnel instead of just chaos. So we've like added like banking angles, right? For additional leverage. But when CAPE comes in and we are able to get them on contract quickly, and they prove out a use case on Guam for mobile virtual network operation that is far superior to what we have, and then world events happen, and then we really need that, then there may be antibodies coming up, but Congress is kudosing us, and the other vendors who are working with them are starting to grab a hold, and then it's easier to divest in the backside. So I'd say, like, if we can block and tackle for long enough for these companies to, from a data perspective and a success stories perspective, so left side of the brain, right side of the brain, tell those wins, then we can then amplify the effort, but then also like double down and say to the other CAPE, the OSD CAPE, this is a success story. Can we put more money against this impactful effort? Yes. And so that is the wedge. In terms of institutionally, how do we make sure there's enough space? One of the ways we've done that is the funnel itself, which is this grew out of strategy through execution. McKinsey has a 3-horizon model. We've added a 4th because we need to divest very hard. And so the Horizon 3 is actively scouting. Horizon 2 is more actively piloting. And Horizon 1 is scaled production. And so the short answer to your question, after a long prelude, is Horizon 2, we've provided some through protections, some psychological safety to say, here's how you're going to pilot. We've seen the demo. We've got the lean business case. Here's how you're going to pilot for 3 months. And if you can't show outcomes in 3 months, then we're going to kill it. But if you can show that we are 3 times more effective, 5 times more effective, then let's figure out how to get this in at scale. The actual concerns or risks were more on, well, what if this is really good and it becomes a runaway boat? We have fear of failure and fear of success, and we contain that within Horizon 2 to say we are learning what overmatched looks like and best practices for scaling, while we're also showing that A/B testing in Horizon 2. That gets us ready to do the scaling.
Yeah. So, Artem, I want to come to you on this because part of what is implicit in what you said, Justin, that you didn't say explicitly, was it also has your wasta, your support, the umbrella of the Navy CTO saying, like, this is part of how we do business, right? You know about some of these stories with CAPE and some others. And that's a pretty cool, I mean, that requires you to be engaged at potentially an operational level. And I'm curious, at your echelon, Artem, does it work the same way, or how does the process work to feed kind of the Horizons portfolio approach that Justin just described?
Yeah, so for the Navy, so not the whole department, the Navy, flag leadership, the 4 stars and 3 stars got together about 2 years ago and devised what is now known as the Navy's navigation plan, which is effectively a list of problems, kind of 9 big capabilities. And it's a document that's publicly accessible to everyone. And these are broad-based ideas that have been war-gamed out, and we've identified, hey, these are operational problems. And we did something that the government usually doesn't do. We time-bound that problem set. We said, these must be fixed no later than January 1st, 2027. And we didn't make that number up. We listened to our peer competitor, China, and the People's Republic of China and the Chinese Communist Party and their leadership, specifically Xi Jinping, have directed the People's Liberation Army to be ready to take Taiwan no later than 2027. So we've time-bound 9 problems and said, you must be ready by 2027. And then we created an implementation framework around this navigation plan. And within that implementation framework, it is, industry solutions or best of breed solutions, no matter where they come from, whether that's DARPA or a 2-person startup. And we are mapping those to those operational problems. So to that point you made earlier that there's a bunch of naysayers out there, that is not the case in the Navy at the moment. In my office and in lots of program offices, in the Pentagon, we've even hung up clocks. They're counting down to January 1st, 2027. And I recognize, hey, there's no guarantee that, the PLA crosses the strait. But in order to be ready for that time horizon, again, we've mapped the solutions to the problems and are now identifying investment opportunities. And those solutions aren't, hey, we have a problem with terminal defense, let's buy more missiles. Those solutions get very concrete down to this is the industry partner that can produce the right amount of scalable mass to meet that operational problem, and we are going out to OSD Cape, to the Hill, et cetera, to the folks that have the power of the purse, and saying we must allocate resources inside of the execution year to solve these problems. And so it maps really well with Justin's Horizons model, and it leads really nicely to divestment, like Justin said in that final horizon, that fourth horizon of divestment of legacy capabilities.
Yeah. Help us understand, like, how do companies intersect with these horizons? So you guys have these strategic plans, these operational plans, these investment plans, whatever you want to call them. Is Horizon 3 all cyber? Is Horizon 2 all OT? Like, how should we think about, if I'm a company, a startup here who's kind of, I'm at TRL 7, like, what does that mean for me on the...
Let's talk go-to-market per horizon. I want to frame this real quick out front. You said, like, hey, the lost, like, this should be more important than any of us. And so we wrote a memo that said, here's what structured piloting looks like. Here's what structured challenges look like. And we're doing a lot more of those. And then here's what outcome-driven metrics are. And here's how you use those. And so the point is, if you're doing a pilot to either be disruptive or to incrementally improve, I'll show you where that happens on the horizons, but this is institutionalized. The Department of Navy's Chief Information Officer have signed off on this. And basically, this is a reference for if there are winners who want to go show how much better than baseline they are, they have the coverage to do that. It's not that everyone is or has to do it, but if you want to know how to win, this is a way to be on the upside of a K curve. And so what does that look like? That looks like, from a transparency perspective, we list the unclassified pilots. We say, hey, here are the folks in Horizon 2. And so now other PEOs, so PEO C4I has some pilots in there. PEO, manpower, logistics, and business can look at what C4I is doing to figure out if there's a deconfliction needed. Or so point is, that transparency is opening up the door to, hey, let's have a meeting to talk. Let's just look at what's happening, and then you can fast forward. So transparency is one of the ingredients. Urgency that Artem mentioned, nothing like a crisis to get people to work together and unify. And so I'd say that's like a useful forcing function. And then the open-mindedness. And so the open-mindedness piece is we're actually listening, which looks like in actual execution, not describing how. And so this comes down to requirements. And so we're doing a lot more top-level requirements, and then even capability needs statements, which are talked about in the software acquisition pathways. And so what does this look like within the horizons? Well, if you're doing a completely new, we don't already buy it, we have no way to buy it, you're a Horizon 3 capability that we've seen companies swim upstream. We like to talk about them. This is Anduril, this is Palantir, this is SpaceX. It helps to have a billionaire founder. That is you probably don't want to go to a PEO with something that's that not well established. And so what you're doing there is probably a guerrilla campaign with DIU and requirements writers and staffers. But you do want to compare that to, at some level, oh, you guys don't do this right now. Well, we have to spend some money on this, unless it's like a completely, even if it's manual action, or, hey, this is a blind spot complete. Like, what is you're not inventing a function, right? So what is the function that we can think about this as? Because you don't want to wait for us to translate it.
And that's on companies to be able to articulate
that and be close to, so don't hire a VP of sales before you understand the ecosystem at all. Move to where your main customer is for 6-9 months to understand it intimately, so that you can make sure that product market fit is established and this is worth scaling.
Right.
For Horizon 2, and so the type of money in Horizon 3 could be anything from SBIRs that like will get you started, but like this does not count as like winning, to potentially app fit. And then I think Raiders a little bit more Horizon 2, but like these new start funds, as well as the 3.5 times more RDT&E or R&D funding that's outside the department versus inside the department now. Right? Like these are places where you can get launched. Horizon 2
just summarize just real quick and make sure I'm getting. So Horizon 3 is, we're talking multi-year horizons to field. You're not talking about something that's like ready to go. This is not commercially validated, super off the shelf technique. It's not COTS, right?
Well, not
it could
COTS.
be.
You lost me at not COTS. So if we just haven't done it already within Department of Defense, if it's something that we don't know how to buy, but it's already like on the right side of dual use, then I wouldn't rule that out.
Okay. So that could be like some sort of blockchain technology that's already being used commercially, but hasn't necessarily been adopted inside the.
Or we're a little bit slow on OT, so operational. Yep.
Yeah, and it shouldn't necessarily, I think like you can look at if you're a traditional acquisitions person who's used to DoD 5000, the FAR, the DFAR, et cetera, and you look at the Horizons model as a major capability acquisition, what you can see is, oh, I go to DARPA STO, or I go to ONR in Horizon 3, and then I go to a program office in Horizon 2, and then I get to OMEN funding sustainment in Horizon 1. That's not the case. This is not the funnel isn't there to drag science and technology projects that start in government labs through. It's there to also bring in, like, that's great. And sometimes those scale. They don't necessarily scale on the same time horizon, not to mix metaphors. This is absolutely to get, a venture-backed company that has some sort of maybe lower TRL capability that is low TRL, not because the science isn't there, but because the integration cost with the legacy system is hard, or some other reason. So it can be dual use, and you pull it through the horizon.
So it's really a mental model to help companies and the government understand kind of where a given pitch or product or capability might fit in the portfolio.
And if we can compare those against each other, and then compare organizations against their ability to transition to Horizon 2 or even directly to Horizon 1, we want to know that. And so I can give you some examples where someone got into Horizon 3 and then we're in Horizon 1 within 9 months. The space sector is moving really quickly right now. And so when we talk to Rivada and then we make some intros for them, and then we are now doing scaling efforts with them, they went rocket fast because they had the right connections. And so that can go really quickly. When we look at DARPA, we say, okay, Constellation's a program that is working between the cyber group within DARPA and Cybercom. And so we're a part of that and facilitating that. It's like an ongoing mechanism, but how often does something transition? We can look at this across the board to make sure that these are funneling into the correct portfolios, the correct program executive offices, the correct sources of fielding capability, and ultimately PEOs.
And I want to hone in on the word funnel, right? This is not a process to like build SBIR farms, right? Like there are companies who intend to get long-term, decades worth of government funding on a single product and just like keep that thing on life support.
Yeah.
It's a funnel because it's meant to facilitate industry competition, right? So I think there's an example used all the time that, in the 1950s, we ran 5 ICBM programs against each other. Those were actually 5 different, parts of the government competing inside the government.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we do not have the TOA, the Total Obligated Authority from Congress any longer to do that. So why don't we leverage market forces and have industry compete against each other and us as the government be the facilitator? What's really critical in tying it to manifest is that competition does not happen on slides, right? To get from 2 to 1, you are demonstrating something at sea, and for the Navy.
And I'll add to that, which is I think you don't want that you want that competition to be, to use the overused word, free, fair, and open, in the sense that you don't want it to be determined by who hired the lobbyist first to shut down, to basically elbow out the other guys. You wanted to make sure that this is a merit-based competition where the government is aware of the different capabilities and sees them in action, not for 5 years, but for a period of time, or against capability, see what team is capable of responding to the requirement in that abbreviated or accelerated time frame. And then put the money behind the one that performs.
Yeah. And that's why having the user both at the event, but also as part of the involvement in the competition phase is so important, right?
Yeah.
For a long time, I think if you're a prime, you work with a specific program office. By the time a user sees your widget, tool, missile, whatever, it's been 5 years, and that has been paid for, money has been obligated, and a contract was awarded.
Yeah.
the user at the onset in the pilot phase, especially around Horizon 2, means that no matter how hard, a government employee in some office somewhere is fighting for a specific vendor, it doesn't matter because the end user is there and can say, nope, these two things to do my job, one is measurably better.
The measurably better is big because the user's feedback is one of the most important things. And there's nothing more than we want than to supply those who protect us with absolutely the best capabilities. If in that process we're actually capturing against baseline how much better this is, then we can take that to all the stakeholders downhill. We can say to money people inside the Navy and at DoD, look at how much better this is. We can say to Congress, look at how much better this is. Hey, we want to do everything except for shut something down. You don't need it anymore. They have shown us that we can get out from under this investment and go faster. And so having the combination of feedback that turns into stories and that data, then we can get through all the hurdles. You can convince me, you can convince Artem, if we have that case where all the naysayers and antibodies can be blocked across the board, and then we can just make the right thing to buy, the easiest thing to buy, let's just do that. That's the flywheel we want.
Yeah. One kind of just final point on this topic. There's like the Murphy's Law of acquisition is that the government's going to just buy the cheapest thing that it can from industry. That only happens when there's a non-competitive market on the other side, right? So if you have, let's say, 5 large companies that are not competing with each other on price or product or performance or whatever, yes, the government's just going to get the cheapest thing because the industry partner on the other side has a perverse incentive to make it the cheapest thing and maximize profits. When the ecosystem grows outside the government, like we're seeing it manifest, and like we're seeing in the defense industrial base for the first time, since the Last Supper, under Secretary Perry, that means that industry is competing and the government is getting, and the warfighter is getting the best of breed product, not the cheapest product.
Yep.
The type of problems we have now are different and endearingly funny. They'll say, well, now we have 3 capabilities and we have to choose one of them. And I'm like, yeah, it's a good thing. And they're like, well, but we already had this money allocated. It means that we can deliver better outcomes sooner. It's going to be more paperwork sometimes, but that's what if they're worth it. And so that's happening. And I say that tongue in cheek, but more people are getting that and figuring out how to pull the best stuff through. A couple of years ago when we had these conversations, I would literally hear from some of the contracting officers who are no longer in the government, we are trying to optimize for fewest number of contracts. No, we're not. We are trying to optimize for the best capability, and the rest of us are in support functions for that. And so when we do things like sub-optimize to minimize risk, it's the risk for the warfighter. It's not the risk of paperwork. It's not the risk of performance as defined by a 4,000-page requirements document that has lost sight of outcomes. It is the overall risk to national security, and we are doing much better at that, and I think we can do way, way better.
So, Justin, it triggered me almost, the risk, right? In the Pentagon, if you're sitting around a big oak table and there's a lot of people having a conversation and someone says the word risk in relation to a program, it is generally not risk to the warfighter. And programmatic risk should never be compared to risk to the warfighter. My last job before this, I was a navigator and operations officer on a Navy cruiser. My sailors were the ones assuming risk, not someone in the Pentagon. And on a from a programmatic standpoint, or someone at the Navy Yard. And so I think we've shifted that conversation, right? We collectively acknowledge now, thanks to some of the processes that we've set up, that's who's assuming the risk, that's who needs the best capability. And I was just in a room with a bunch of program office folks. They were demoing a capability. It was a GOTS capability. And somebody, one of the sailors complained that, hey, the user interface should have this, this, and this. And one of the program office folks said, we are measuring against the requirements, not your needs as the user. And I think I dove over a chair and said, actually, in accordance with the new Secretary of Defense's memo, you will follow the software acquisition pathway, which measures outcomes based on the user. So I think we are really pushing for that risk conversation to change.
Awesome conversation. I'm going to resist the temptation to dive deeper into this particular one, but I think to pick up where you just left off, how important was that software acquisition pathway memo? Like how both in terms of the signal and in terms of not just the intent, but actually what is achieved? Like how far does that move us in the direction you all are talking about in terms of integrating the voice of the user with the acquisition process? Where do we need to go even further?
The Secretary of Defense doing that as one of the first actions and explicitly saying that software-defined warfare is here suggests that we can move faster and prioritize the right things. So I'd say it's tremendously important. And in terms of overall alignment, best alignment I've seen in 25 years to execute and shoot the hole. Now, we've had authorities to do the right thing. You're allowed to do the right thing. How many people will? And so what we look at is like what percentage of your population is unleashed and outcomes focused. And so can we find these mismatches? We've established processes, but it's not about the process. It's about the results. So can you stack these results to make them undeniable so that this repeats itself? Like speed, very few people think of going faster as less risk, but going faster actually costs less and is less risk in a lot of cases. And so I think what we need to happen as a result of that is we are teeing up and Unleashed people have a little bit more leverage in conversations to say we should use a commercial solutions offering. We should use an other transactional agreement to go out and do this thing. We can use software instead of hardware. We can buy something that is modular instead of buying the whole vertical. I think we have leverage to do that. Now we need ass-kicking wins that we never go back to the old way, and we need to stack those up. And the K-curve that we've seen on, for instance, structured pilots, where a motivated team can perform 25 times better than status quo, we need those value jumps and mismatches to continue to up the ante so that we say, look, we got rid of 10 years of technical debt in the last 4 months. And here's how much better we can be. And here are all the new entrants we let in. And here are all the people who were working in, finance, who are now working on national security, because artificial intelligence is the greatest disruptor of every capability for the next long time to come. So what does that ushering in looks like? It looks like the outcomes that we get in the next 6 months as a result of this door opening.
The memo, if you read it specifically, uses softer language, right? It doesn't say you shall. It says this is the preferred method, right? The preferred method is the software acquisition pathway 5000.87, and the preferred method for contracting on the software acquisition pathway are OTAs and commercial solutions openings. That doesn't matter. It doesn't need to be directive. That memo just empowered a whole lot of people who have wanted to do the right thing and couldn't. I think one of the coolest experiences I've had in this job is I went to a Navy lab, and I was getting a tour of the lab, and people there are doing amazing work in data analytics for the Surface Navy. And as I'm getting the tour from the SCS, the member of the Senior Executive Service, who's the director of this lab, we walked past this room full of 20-something engineers that are, in their 20s. And I was like, oh, what's in there? And she was like, oh, these are all of our new employees that we've gotten over the last 2 years. And I was like, oh, let me talk to them. And to a T, every single one of them was mission-oriented. Some of them came from, the FANGs and came from very high-paying jobs in Northern California to work at a remote Navy lab in Southern California with nothing around it, because they wanted to focus on the mission. Those junior folks probably were kicking and screaming to some of the more entrenched antibodies, saying, hey, we should do the software acquisition pathway, or we should use these non-FAR-based contracts, and we're ignored. And I think that won't be the case. One piece of paper doesn't change it, but I think it builds significant momentum.
If it's indicative of a culture shift, it's a pretty damn good start. Gents, we're going to have to wrap soon. This has been phenomenal. Let's leave the folks with a little bit of that ass-kicking rocket fuel of give us a story or an anecdote of a company that has or who cares about the company, of a capability that's come through this process that you all are proud of, that you have fielded or in process of fielding, that is better off, and that the warfighter is better off because this process has been in place?
Big focus on unmanned systems right now, right? What we're seeing in Ukraine is that small UAS are the new small unmanned aerial systems are the new method of executing long range fires to enable maneuver on the battlefield. At sea, the equivalent of that is like small unmanned surface vessels. Today in the Navy, we have the robotic and autonomous systems team that's part of the navigation plan that I mentioned earlier. But that team isn't directing down to everybody and saying, yep, this is the one robot that we've bought. Everybody will buy this robot. You will get the robot 5 years from now and we'll train on the robot. Instead, we have multiple industry partners, some of which we've seen out here today, competing and testing their robots in real time, both at the robot proving ground on the West Coast and down in the Caribbean as part of the U.S. 4th Fleet, over in the Mediterranean as part of the U.S. 6th Fleet, and in the Arabian Gulf as part of U.S. Navy Task Force 59. So you have these Navy teams at the edge testing robots and then kind of reporting up, hey, this is best of breed. So we're seeing the Navy go from 0 small unmanned surface vessels to the scale of thousands over the next 2 years.
Compute on ships is dated. Compute on land within the Department of Navy has historically been dated also. We went through a surge on refreshing edge compute ashore. And then we had a couple ships reach out and say, we'd like to try that on our ship. And that's a different program office. It's a different program executive office. We said, let's do this. And so we put it on different classes of ships. They started running it and they were able to do more and better things than they were before. And so this is one where the most expensive construction that humans have ever come up with is silos, right? And so where we're operating transparently and sharing across organizations to just bring disruptions in faster, it's working well. And so on one of the ships that was leaving the Red Sea, there was some battle damage in the Red Sea, and there were some news reports that people on that ship took direct fire. They used that compute and connectivity. All of these things were new and commercial on that ship for the first time in Navy history, video teleconference home to families to say, hey, don't worry, anything you heard, we're safe. We're coming back to port right now. And so the types of quality of work and quality of service and overall digital transformation opportunities that are opened by using more commercial and sharing and connecting dots and making outcomes-driven decisions, we are and can go much, much faster.
That's a great, hopefully, kind of set of motivations for our audience, and also testament to the work that you guys are doing. Thank you both. This is not easy work. It is, as I know both of you can attest, meaningful work, and the timing couldn't be more urgent. So appreciate you both being in the fight and for doing everything you're doing and for joining us today.